right, guys. What did I do with my hat? I don't know. Hold on a minute. Looks like we got a live stream. Give me a minute here. I guess no, got my hat. Okay. Well, let's see how we do today with our live stream. And today we're going to talk about the Tomahawk missiles going to Ukraine and what you should think or react to that. There's a lot of sites out alarming you about this, so you'll stop buying prepper supplies, discounted heavily. It's true, but don't go off the deep end with this. If they had nukes, don't you think they would have used them by now? If anybody had them, they would have used them. Don't you think they would have attacked Israel? If Pakistan had nukes, people would have given them, the other Muslim states would have given them $1 trillion for a nuke and then just fire it at Israel. You know, come on. Come on, guys, wake up. If they were real, you'd know about it a long time ago. These leaders of the world countries are not righteous, substantial, upstanding people. Okay. And we're going to talk about what's going on in Gaza with this peace plan, and it's basically falling apart at onset. I think Trump, as the days go by, is giving up more and more on his Nobel Peace Prize, which is going to be awarded to somebody on Friday this week. So I think if Trump can bag a good ceasefire peace plan by Wednesday, he could probably squeeze in. See, they're going to announce it on Friday. That probably means they know who's going to get it on Thursday or even Wednesday. So he's got probably, in reality, till Monday or Tuesday. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt, and I would stretch it to Wednesday, probably not Thursday. There's always a chance they don't give anybody this Nobel Peace Prize. They've done that quite a few times in the 120 years or so they've been doing this. But then again, they might give it to somebody. Do I think they'll give it to Trump? Very much no. Trump is threatening Hamas with destruction if they don't sign the peace plan, and that's not exactly what the people who do the Nobel Prize Award are really looking for. A ceasefire peace plan done by extortion and threat of annihilation. So I would say on a 10 scale, 10 being the best, Trump has about a 1 or a 2 chance. There's a lot of political pressure going for them to award Trump the Nobel Peace Prize, but I don't think it's going to get legs and go anywhere. We'll get into this. And let me do some praise right now. There is no God like Jehovah. 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 There is no Messiah like Yeshua. 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 Okay, let me get into the live stream and put a post up rather quickly. These days, got to make sure we got a live stream, don't we? Looks like it. And put a post up rather quickly. These days, got to make sure we got a live stream, don't we? We got sound and picture. And let me turn this down. Okay. All right. Almost there. No, doesn't want a pin. There we go. All right, let's see. Okay, everything looks pretty good. All right. Thank you for my moderators. It's helpful if you give us a thumbs up. Not many people in here. I don't know why. The sound and picture looks pretty good. Check it again. Looks like it. And put a post up. I don't know, but that's fine. Curious that there's so few people. The people are coming in and going out. Okay, so what is the big news on the internet today is Trump is definitely giving Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. It's got an 1,800-mile range. It's probably able to easily carry a 1,000-pound warhead, and they tell you it's nuclear capable. So run out and buy your iodine pills, and run out and buy food and bullets and guns and all your preps, and get scared. And it's silly. All Russia said they would do is retaliate in like kind. What is disturbing is Russia flying drones into numerous countries. And in Lithuania, the latest drone attack from Russia, or incursion, proved to be cigarette smugglers. But that doesn't mean Russia wasn't doing it elsewhere, because I believe that was the case. Okay. The person in Hebrew posted Shema Yisrael. You can leave that post up, guys. That's fine. I know it's a foreign language, Hebrew, but just leave it go. It's fine. There's no nastiness intended whatsoever. Okay. So what is Putin? What is Trump going to have Ukraine do? Is attack the Russian oil refineries deeper into Russia, thus weakening Russia's ability to sell oil through bricks off the US dollar, which is what this is really about. Okay? That's the goal here. That's why Ukraine is hitting the oil refineries and oil storage facilities of Russia with great success. And that's why Iran's going to get hit. That's what's going to happen. There's a tremendous amount of refueling tankers in the Middle East. And there's a bunch of aircraft carriers moving to the Middle East from America. And the snapback sanctions that have been placed on Iran are punitive as all get up. So it's going to be an interesting event. Okay. Trump is trying to get a Nobel peace plan cooking with Hamas and Gaza. They're meeting in Alexandria, Egypt. Israel's there. America's there. Witkoff and that kid that's married to Trump's female tall daughter with the apang roms. And the big feet. Kushner. And Hamas is basically announcing thank you for the comment on the live stream. Hamas is basically announcing in Arab media, pro-terrorist media, that they are not disarming, they're not turning the government over to somebody else, they're not leaving Gaza, and they're not even giving all the hostages back. Now, Witkoff and Kushner and Trump are running around telling the media that it's going well and we're going to have the hostages back this week. Well, that's just fluff. Trump is doing that to make sure that the Norway Nobel Peace Prize people hear about it and pay attention to what he's doing. But he then turns around and says, if you don't do it, we're going to blow you up, or Israel will blow you up. So he's not exactly threatening the United States is going to come in with the F-22s and F-15s, so we're going to, turn you into a smoldering heap of ashes. He's telling him Israel's going to do it, but he's leaving out that Israel's going to do it with American bombs. Netanyahu's not very happy about this at all. Now, Putin and Netanyahu is starting to talk on the phone, which is very unusual. I wonder what Putin's angle is. Netanyahu does get along to some extent with our boy Putin. And I'm not sure what Putin's cooking up, but he might be trying to get to Trump through Netanyahu. Through Netanyahu. This would not at all surprise me. This could be something going on that it could really be And I think Trump would listen to Netanyahu. To what extent, I'm not sure. Okay. Because of this Tomahawk missile, I imagine gold went up again. Let's take a look and see if it broke 4,000. Believe me, if gold broke 4,000, it's a big deal. I mean, it's a huge deal. Okay. It's currently at 39.73, which is, $26.10 under 4,000. That's right now. Silver's trading at 48.43. Now, what we need to do is see what the high was for gold in the last 24 hours. Sounds like Bueller giving the Gettysburg Address to the neighbor's dogs. Let's check. No, I don't believe it hit 4,000. 4,000 is what's referred to as a resistance point, but I would also add that it's not a little resistance point, it's a massive resistance point. When you hit the 4,000, you're going to trigger all kinds of buy and sell orders. In other words, people are going to they're going to put a buy order in, and they're going to probably put down $4,015 or $25 or something. And they're going to be thinking, okay, when it breaks 4,000 plus a few dollars, it's on its way for a run. And then they might put in a sell order that if gold goes to $4,003, sell it at $4,019. Okay, so they might only own it an hour or two or three, but they don't care because they'll put options in and control 500 or 1,000 ounces of gold, and if they make $15 an ounce times 1,000, they made $15,000 in a few hours. That's how they do it. They don't take possession. The difficulty is if you don't take possession and gold really goes on a big climb or a crash, I don't see any reason for it to crash. But if it goes on a big climb up, they may close trading because they'll get scared. I don't know. Usually they don't on a rise. It's rare. Actually, I don't remember it. But with gold, they might. They're afraid of gold getting too high. If gold gets to, 7,500, they're really nervous about that. Nobody's going to want to use paper money because it's going to be diminished, So people are saying Trump's the Antichrist. He's not the Antichrist. It's a bad term to say Antichrist. What did the scriptures say? Back about 2,000 years ago, they said, even today there's many Antichrists among us. It's someone opposed to the Messiah, to Yeshua. That's all it means. Christ means the anointed, Mashiach. So in Hebrew, the word for Christ or Christos is Mashiach. That's it. In the Greek, it's Christ. In the Latin, it's Christos. In the Hebrew, the source, it's Mashiach. It means anointed 104 times. It's in the Old Testament. Not every time does it refer to Yeshua. Okay? So, um, that's your Antichrist. Okay? Now, what they mean to tell you is the beast, but they're confused. Okay? The beast comes up out of the pit. Trump didn't come up out of the pit, the best we could gather. Okay? Trump's not the beast. Trump's not the Antichrist. Neither was Obama or any other jerks. Okay? Um, so don't go, chasing that. But Trump is in a snare. That's found in Jeremiah 50, verse 30. I'll find it. I think it's 30. Could it be 34? Let's take a quick look. And this, of course, is talking about America being the daughter of Babylon, which a lot of people know, millions, but a lot of people don't know it also. I don't have the verse right. I'll get it looked up real quick. Um, I'll have it in a second. Oh, it's verse 24, not 34. So it's Jeremiah 50, verse 24. And I'll read it to you. I have laid a snare for thee, and thou art also taken, O Babylon, and thou wast not aware. Thou art found and also caught, because thou hast striven against Jehovah. Okay. Now, let me give you just one fast example of Trump striving against Jehovah is the taking of Gaza to be a place for him to build gambling casinos and resorts. And he forbids Netanyahu from letting the Israelites occupy Gaza. It's our land. So he's trying to go against prophecy and make sure prophecy doesn't get fulfilled. That's what he's doing. Nothing but. Okay? Now, anti Semitism in the world is growing quite a bit. You know that. France just fell apart again. They're very anti Semitic, anti Israel. If you're there's no such thing as being anti Israel and not anti Semitic. Get real. Um, so the Prime Minister of France, which is beneath Macron, who I believe is the president, resigned in under a month. They have a very strong contingent of Muslims in France. They've had them since the 80s, coming from Africa, colonies of theirs. And so they're on second and third generation, probably mostly, could be third generation, definitely second. And Qatar is putting a lot of money into France and controlling them, like he's doing with America, Qatar. Qatar is a staunch enemy of Israel, and Israel should attack it, but they're not. So, we don't know what Macron's going to do yet. He has a few options. We'll find out. Of course, one option is that he owns up to the fact that he's the big problem, because he's trying to steer the country into being pro-Muslim, and they don't want to be. And that's the problem. So he could resign, but that piece of garbage isn't going to resign so quick. He'll ride the ship down to the bottom. He doesn't care about the French people. He cares about the unclean spirits that manage him tremendously, and Satan, and that's who he's worried about keeping happy. He's not very worried about Trump. He certainly dislikes Israel, or will do anything against Israel at this point. Now, he's also anti-Iran. I believe Qatar is anti-Iran. So he's likely going to be in the attack against Iran. And you need to understand, after the 10th of October, maybe even the 9th or the 8th, it appears Trump's going to war, because no more Nobel Peace Prize. Now, if Trump actually does get the Nobel Peace Prize, there's always a 10 or 20% chance. Then he's going to try to keep things quiet for a brief period of time. And when he does go to war, he's going to make sure it looks like the other side started it. It's a possibility they could revoke his Nobel Peace Prize, but I think that'd be a very rare event. Now, the Nobel Peace Prize people know that he's threatening Iran, all of this stuff, Gaza, Yemen, Iraq, Russia, China, North Korea, Belarus, And that's not a symptom of a peacemaker, that's a symptom of a warmonger. So, I don't see it happening. And I don't see Gaza, Hamas and Gaza making much of a concession. I think they're playing Trump for a joke. And what's going to wind up happening is Trump's going to be either getting nothing concrete from them by Thursday, or he's going to get the same old demands without any change, or perhaps a very slight change or two. Let's see. Now the problem is it might come with a deal that Israel has to take all their troops out of Gaza, completely withdraw, open the Rafah crossing, and then, if we're confident that Israel means it, and they're going to release 1,000 or 2,000 terrorist prisoners, and we tell them who they're going to release, then we might give them half the hostages. But we're going to keep the other half for a long time to make sure Israel goes through with it. No, this is what you'll get. Netanyahu knows this. And Netanyahu is being forced to go along with this cock and bull story by Trump. And he's not at all happy about it, but he's doing it, you know. And he's going along with junk. But there's a point where Netanyahu has to put his foot down because they'll do a vote of no confidence on him. If he doesn't, they'll throw him out of office and put a new one in a matter of days who will nullify anything Netanyahu did, and then it'll put Trump in a worse position. But Trump wouldn't care about that if he got the Nobel Peace Prize already. You see? Why does Trump want it? Basically, it's just a cool thing to have. He's got so much money. I don't know how many billions of dollars he picked up after his first term, but I imagine he's probably up in the 25 to $100 billion range. And, going out and buying new stuff is many decades ago has got boring for Trump. Going out and buying rings worth $2 million and necklaces, and that all wore out. Buying mansions, he's got so many. Buying a yacht, he has one, he doesn't use it. Buying a plane, he's got a plane the size of an airliner. It's an older plane. Now, these older airliners you can buy rather inexpensively, believe it or not. It's the new jets that are big ticket. And what a lot of people do is they buy the older jet and they redo the interior, which can cost on a big airliner $1 or $2 million. And then they, have to go through all the testing for the structure, the stress in the wings and the fuselage. The motors get rebuilt, the electronics, the hydraulics, some of the glass might get changed. When you're in the cockpit of these jets, and it's an airline jet that's popular, and they have, the windshield's broken into sections with metal dividers. Those sections, if you're looking at a small jet where there's not a lot of them that have been made, one of those sections could be $75,000. So if you happen to hit a big pigeon and you crack it, you won't pass the inspection, and you're pretty stupid to go flying with it cracked. So, because if another bird or something hits it, you could really be in a bad way. So you got to change it. But when you're talking about an airliner where they have a lot of them, it might cost $15,000 to change it or something like that. parts are not so bad when it's a popular airline. So that's what Trump did. Instead of going out and spending, $75 million on a new plane, airliner size jet, he bought an older one and then rebuilt it. And that's a common thing people do. The issue is um, the cost of the maintenance on those things is rather excessive, and you need to have a pilot and a crew. So what you would normally have is, if you were having a small jet that was, 6 or 8 seats, you'd probably just hire a guy to fly it, a pilot, because that would be a short hop jet. And if the guy feels good and he's in good health, he's probably going to still be feeling good and in good health 2 or 3 hours later. But when you start talking transatlantic, transpacific jets, you're going to probably minimally have a pilot and a co-pilot. You'll have two of them. You're not going to have a navigator or a radio operator, because it's rather easy for them to do that these days. And you'll have probably two stewardesses that would be there to serve food, take food away, serve alcohol, take alcohol away, serve um, fruits and juices and things like that. That's probably what Trump does. So his kids probably use the plane rather regularly, so I imagine he keeps the crew on 24/7, which is expensive. These guys are going to make $200,000-300,000 a year each, at least 175, I figured. With Trump getting highly experienced, they're probably making 250, 300 a year plus benefits. And the stewardesses, they'd probably get 80 or 100,000 or something like that. But there's a big expense. And then when you go somewhere, you're burning fuel, not like you are in a little 6 or 8 seater. You're burning fuel like an airliner. So you're going through the stuff in wholesale quantities. But if you want to transport 15 people with you, you can do it, 20 people. If you want to go move from New York to Mar-a-Lago for the season, and you're Trump and you want to bring, 27 suitcases, you can put them in. You can put 125 suitcases in that jet, easy steezy, you know. So, um, it's not a light thing to run around with an airliner. Elvis did it. He was just an entertainer, but he had an airliner. I think it was a 707. He had an airliner and he had a smaller jet. I think it was a Lear for short runs. And they said that he used to get on the plane late at night with his, bodyguard crew. They called it the Memphis Mafia, and they would fly to some place where they knew the guy, and they'd get peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on toast or something. Now, the maid that lived there with Elvis said that that wasn't true, but we don't know. I think the maid really liked Elvis, knew that he had a lot of problems, and liked him anyway. These people that have the kind of money Elvis had will often hire a maid or two, and they'll keep them for decades. And after 5 or so years, they start treating the maid like family. So if the maid needs a medical procedure for $60,000 or something, they'll do it. And frequently they'll put the maid on their insurance. If they have a company they might switch the maid to the corporate payroll, which is maybe kosher or not kosher, depending, and put the maid on their health insurance, so that takes care of that problem. And a lot of times, these rich people have, you know, 4, 5, 6 cars at the property, and they'll have, usually at least 2, maybe 3 or 4 very expensive cars that they like. Now, some wealthy people don't bother with the cars. They'll just go out and get themselves a Cadillac. Or the Bush family, when the guy was governor, I was in Florida, and he would buy basic Mercedes sedans, not the real deluxe ones, the basic ones. He'd go to a car dealer and buy 2 at a time, just write a check for them. And they were, the base models. They weren't. He was pretty careful about keeping his image down. He could have bought a fleet of Rolls Royces, but he didn't. But even a baser Mercedes is still going to give you an excellent ride. It's very safe in the rain. If you have an accident, it's a good car. But he didn't get the ones with the hand-built engines, the AMGs. He got basic sedans. I think he was buying mid-size too, so they would hold 5 people. And that works. You know. Mercedes engines, people get 500,000 miles out of those things. You can get a long run on a Mercedes. You got to do the maintenance on it, which is not that bad, but they don't show a lot of wear. They're very well made. You can do good with a Mercedes. Toyota's another one that you could get, 300, 500,000 miles out of. There's a lot of other cars that are junk that you're not going to get a lot of miles out of. I don't hear people getting a Lincoln Navigator or a Cadillac Escalade and getting that kind of miles, maybe 100,000. So they don't last long compared to the other cars. Rolls Royces and Bentleys do last. Well, I don't know about the Bentley. I think it's made by uh, BMW now, but it's probably pretty good. I don't know who makes Rolls Royce, but in the old days, they would last a long time. You could keep those running for 30, 40 years. So, uh, let's see what else is going on here. I don't think I got prayer requests. Okay. Trump was at the other day at the 250th anniversary of the Navy, and he said that another Venezuelan boat was destroyed, and this happened on Saturday night. Today is Tuesday already, so that's interesting. Now, that doesn't take a lot of guts to go around and knock off the Venezuelan boats. He hasn't attacked Venezuela, but he probably will, at least the cartels there. Reuters reports that the U.S. believes that 5,000 Cuban troops are fighting in Ukraine. Well, that is, Russia and Cuba are allied for many, many years. So it's a distinct possibility. It is. Do I know that that's true? No, but it's a possibility for sure. Why we didn't hear about it until now, I don't know. That's suspicious, but we'll see. It'll come out. A large number of U.S. aerial refueling tankers have moved from Qatar to Saudi Arabia near the Red Sea. Why? Because the Red Sea is, well, Saudi Arabia is next door to the Houthis, and they're on the endangered species list that Trump has. So, but since they're next door, I don't understand why they need refueling tankers, because he's obviously going to bring the jets into Saudi Arabia also. They would need refueling tankers if they were going to take off from Saudi Arabia to go to Iran. Okay? That would be the only time. So it's back to Iran, but also Yemen's going to probably get it with Iran because they're going to back Iran and start retaliating in favor of Iran when Iran gets hit. So the relocation of these aerial refuelers from America are just another sign that Trump, once his debacle with the Nobel Peace Prize falls away, he's going to war. And that's probably why he's been refraining from war for so long, making Israel suffer and America suffer and the American allies suffer for him getting a stinking Nobel Prize award, like Obama did. Very jealous, immature individual, Trump. Masked men infiltrated the West Bank from Jordan, I believe. This was last night, yesterday sometime, or the night before last night. I think it was the night before last night. Both men that came in were wearing masks, and they broke into houses of Jews in the West Bank and were robbing things. And apparently, they went back to Jordan. They were spotted on cameras at a little after 3 o'clock in the morning walking through the streets. So, how smart they are walking around the streets at 3 in the morning wearing a mask. Gee, nobody would suspect anything's wrong. They were not apprehended, they were not shot at, and they didn't sound an infiltration siren. They sent out WhatsApp messages to people telling them to shelter in place. What you need to know about the West Bank is these people that live there are armed. It's not like Gaza. They got weapons. They got a whole slew of weapons. Like they could have pistols that they had to purchase, and they could get assault weapons from the government that would belong to an arsenal in the settlement, but they could check it out. So most likely, almost all the houses in the West Bank have a gun. So if the Jordanian anti-Israel terrorists cut the fence like these two clowns and come in, they're going to be running into bullets. Now, if they come in amounts of 5 or 10,000, they will have to do what we would call a kamikaze or a bonsai attack. I will explain. In World War II, fighting against Japan, when they were doing poorly, they asked for soldiers that would die for the emperor, who held himself out as being a deity. You couldn't step on the guy's shadow. That's how bad it was. They wouldn't see him. He wouldn't show himself. Um, MacArthur stopped all that, made him appear in public, and people realized he wasn't any deity. Um, but this guy, the emperor, was thought by many to be a deity, and giving your life for the emperor was a very good thing for the afterlife, for your family, and all this nonsense. So a lot of these pilots would volunteer, and they would, they were being indoctrinated like the Muslim terrorists in a similar way. Give your life for God to kill the enemy. The enemy in this case wasn't Israel. There was no Israel back then. It was America. Now, they got in airplanes, and gasoline was short towards the latter years of the war, so they would take off typically from an aircraft carrier, and they would have a partial amount of gasoline in their tank because they were not to come home. And they would wear a nice uniform and a white scarf, and they would be saluted by the whole ship, and they would drink a shot of sake, which could have been 6 ounces or something. We don't know. I mean, they could have got them booped. And they would take off with their aircraft, and they would find American ships. Aircraft carriers were the big prize, and they would try to ram their plane into the ship because the plane was loaded with explosives. So it was a and there was a real problem with these kamikazes hitting the ships. They would come in at the ship, they would dive at the ship, they would, they'd be flying in, they'd get close, and they'd have altitude, and then they'd come down as fast as they could, which was probably around 300, 350 miles an hour. And the guys on the ships would fire everything they had at these planes. Now, aircraft carriers and destroyers and heavy cruisers back then carried a large amount of anti-aircraft guns. They didn't have missiles. They had 40 millimeters, which were basically flak, with shrapnel. They used even 5-inch guns with shrapnel, and they had machine guns, 50 caliber and 20 millimeter. But they had guns all around the sides of the ship. They were loaded with guns. And all the guns would bear down on these planes, and not all the planes reached the ship. They found out they would fall in the drink, but enough did. The other thing that the Japanese did is they had something called a banzai attack. Let's say they were on an island in Japan in the latter years of the war, and the American forces were 5-1. They had very few or no planes left. They had very few Navy ships, and those ships, there was nobody to come help them. They were there. They had a certain amount of ammo. They had artillery. They had mortars. They were dug in. They had food. And along comes the Americans landing on their island, and they were pushed back, and they're in a bad way. So what would they do at that point? Well, they would get together with whatever weapons they had, and when they'd get near an American base or collection point where American troops were, and they would just scream and run at the Americans, shooting their rifles and pistols and swinging their swords, just anything, and they would get mowed down and die in large quantities. And that's what they did. Now, we also saw, now I want to bring something out to you. Japan lost that war. They were doing the kamikaze attacks and they were doing the banzai attack, and they lost nothing. Another little trick that the Japanese would pull is there were places when they would be surrounded and they would pull hand grenades out and hold them to themselves and blow themselves to a quick death. Once the hand grenade blows up, you're going to be unconscious and dead in, a second or two. So it was a pretty realistically, probably a pretty painless way to die, and nobody was shipping the bodies home back to Japan back in the latter days. So um, that's what they were doing. So they were killing themselves also, which you don't see the Muslim terrorists do that. They don't go out and commit suicide because the Japanese were basically punishing themselves for losing the war and doing such a bad job. To save face, they were killing themselves to punish themselves. So we're not seeing that with the Muslim terrorists, but what we're likely going to start seeing is suicide attacks, and very possibly in Gaza. Now, during the very early 1900s, we're talking pre-World War One. America was working in the Philippines and fighting. They were fighting in the Philippines against. Oops. Okay. Fighting in the Philippines against a bunch of people called the Moros, Moros. They were Muslim fanatic fighters. And the Americans were using a 38 caliber revolver back then, and these Moros would rush at the American forces like a banzai attack. And they had machetes and spears and big knives and things like that, swords. And it was close fighting. It wasn't fighting at 200 meters, So it wasn't this, it was pistol. And the American soldiers were shooting these guys with the 38 special revolvers. And some of you might know 38 special revolvers are not so good. The New York City police used them for 50 years at least, but they didn't openly complain about them, but many other departments did. I used to work in law enforcement and was a young guy. So they would bounce off car windshields, and when you shot people with them, they didn't always go down right away. It was a dangerous weapon. It was the standard was 158 grains lead slug that would go about 850 feet per second out of a 4-inch revolver, and it had plenty of accuracy, no deficiency in accuracy, and it would penetrate 15 inches of ballistic gelatin, so it would go in a person and probably not exit them, but maybe exit the back, and it did at times, depending what they had on for clothes. Did it hit bones and what went on? But was it in an angle or straight through? In other words, if they're going up like this, it's, to come here and then go out there could be quite a few inches because you got the diagonal. So they were having a lot of trouble killing these Moro warriors. A lot of trouble. They were shooting them with the 38 special and it wasn't going anywhere. So then they introduced the 45. And I believe it manifested in the form of the 45 ACP, the semi-automatic, which had 7 rounds in the clip, 1 round in the chamber. You had 8 rounds. You had a 230 grain bullet, full metal jacket, at 850 feet per second. Okay, there was nothing wrong with this bullet. It was a man stopper. It was highly accurate. It was good. The guns themselves, depending who made them, which company made them. Remington made them, Colt made them, this company made them, that company, Ithaca made them. The gun could be bad and jam. It depends who made it. Okay, um, and it worked fine when they went to that and they shot the Moros with the 230 grain slug at the same speed instead of 158. And it had a full metal jacket, so it would go in and come out. It would penetrate them, and that meant you had 2 holes in the body to bleed out of, not just one. It's important. And that's where the 45 ACP got its reputation initially, and it was a darn good gun. So they went to solve a problem, the American Army, that didn't really have one, and they went to the 9mm Beretta, which was an excellent gun. I've had them. Excellent gun. Didn't jam. Accurate. The problem was the darn thing was 9mm. So what they did is they went to 115 grains at about 1,1200 feet per second. So they went to a puny little shell, okay, full metal jacket, at not a great high speed. And it was a very bad man stopper. So what they would do is pump multiple rounds into somebody, and then it would work. So if you shot him 3 times, you probably got a pretty good effect. But it got to the police. The police said, "Oh, this is a great idea." Well, one of the reasons the Americans did this is they had a lot of women in fighting positions in the military when this happened. In other words, during Vietnam, did they have women going out in the field with the men and fighting? No, never happened. Did they have women working as nurses that would get in a base and the base would be overrun and maybe they picked up a gun and shot the Vietnamese? Yeah, that happened. But the women that, as far as I know, in Vietnam, the only way they were endangered they were in medical. You could have a woman doctor, they existed, and you had women nurses, and that was about it. So they started putting the women in combat roles or in regular army positions, and they couldn't handle the 45 ACP. It's a large, clunky gun, okay, but a good one. And you don't need anything else. You don't even need trick ammo with that. Just buy cheap 230 grain full metal jacket. They call it 230 grain ball, and that's all you need. You don't need to get hollow points and high speed versions, although you can get all that stuff. Just a basic round. Jeff Cooper and I was trained in a private gun school by Jeff Cooper's range master, Robbie Barkman. I had 5 days with Robbie Barkman, and that guy really taught me how to shoot. He was Jeff Cooper's range master for years. He didn't get along with Jeff Cooper too good, but Jeff Cooper knew a whole lot about guns and how to teach people to shoot. So Jeff Cooper said with 1 round with the 45 ACP, you had about an 80% chance of stopping the fight. You're not looking to kill somebody, you're looking to stop the fight. Now the military could be looking to kill somebody because they don't want the soldiers getting healed and coming back and fighting a month later or 2 months later. They want them dead. But law enforcement, you just want to stop the fight. So you got an 80% chance, 4 out of 5 times, you shoot somebody in the torso with a 45 ACP, you're going to stop them from fighting. Now, if you shoot them here, it's not going to work, of course, you know. If you shoot them in the head, it's probably going to work. If you shoot them in the jaw, maybe, maybe not, probably. So what Cooper told everybody was, if you shoot them twice, you've got almost 100% chance of stopping the fight. Now, there is no such thing as 100% of anything with bullets. They tell the story of a guy with a 50 caliber machine gun in the military, and the thing broke. And the bolt came flying out when a shot went off, and it went through this guy right around slightly above his hip bone. And it was a 1 pound piece of metal that went in the front and was sticking out the back. It had pure penetration. And the guy did not die, and I believe he walked again and all that. But they tell you that story to understand that he got shot with a 1 pound bullet, the bolt, at point blank, just about point blank. He was 2 or 3 feet away, and survived. So there is no magic bullet you're going to shoot them with. Now, if you shoot them with a 5-inch artillery shell and it hits them, I would think they would stop fighting, you know, but how do you carry a 5-inch artillery, piece with you, you know? So the 45 was considered the best compromise, and it worked. What these Moros did in the Philippines that was absolutely frightening, they chewed some kind of stimulant. I don't know if it was the same junk the Houthis chewed or something different, probably the same. And the American soldiers there would have bayonets on their rifles, and their rifles, I believe, were bolt action. They probably had a 4 or 5 round clip, and they probably were shooting something like a 303, or I don't know, something like that. Probably rather potent gun. And if you got hit with one of their rifle shells, you probably went down for the count. But again, the Moros were ambushing and charging them at night, and it was close quarters. So there were instances where the guy with the Moro would be coming, and he generally did not have a gun. He generally had a sword, a spear, a big knife, or something. A machete was popular. And the bayonets back then weren't like 6 or 8 inches like today. They were, 15, 18, 17 inches. So when you stuck them in somebody and you hit him hard, it would come out the other side, and that was usually rather fatal, So they would impale the Houthis, charging them with the bayonet. And they didn't always get the bayonet to have a deep penetration, but they impaled the guy on the bayonet. And what these Houthis would do from this stuff they were chewing, this drug, a narcotic or something, is they would grab the gun, the rifle, while they were impaled and pull it into them, which the soldier would not let go of his rifle. So it would bring the soldier closer, and then they would hit him with their machete. Imagine pulling the bayonet deeper into your body. And that makes me think about the Houthis, So it was, this now they lost the Philippines fight. So in history, you'll find these suicide military people generally lose. Now you go to Europe in World War II, Hitler's people did a lot of damage. Now they had a lunatic running them, which was their big problem. And they lost the war, and but they weren't using suicide They didn't use suicide bombers or suicide people or anything like that. The Germans tried to kill their enemy and stay alive as hard as they could. Okay. But they did stupid things. They started mixing genocide against the Jews into the war. Well, they made the war about the Jews, really. But it was an alibi more than anything. It was, Hitler wanted conquering. Initially, Hitler was going to send the Jews out of Germany, and he went and spoke to the mullah, the head of the Muslim, what would you call it, the Muslim church or whatever in Jerusalem, which was not part of Israel back then. And Hitler went to speak to him and said, I'm going to I'm going to export or expel the Jews out of Germany. And this mullah guy said, no, don't do that. They'll just come here. I don't want them. So then he talked with Hitler, and Hitler and him apparently came to the conclusion that it would be better to kill the Jews. So he put them into places where they would kill them frequently with gassing them, other times starvation and hard work. That's what Hitler was doing. Now, you're not going to see that happen again, although the church thinks it will, because they envision themselves up in heaven while Israel suffers through some tribulation, and all this nonsense they have. Now, I think in the middle of all this, Canada people are fearful of a gun confiscation coming from Trudeau. So Trudeau must be afraid of him getting overthrown for some reason. Generally, gun confiscation or gun control on a strict level is normally always the government being fearful of being overthrown. 99% of the time, that's exactly what it is. Let's find out what happened. Let's see exactly why, because I was. The liberal movement under Prime Minister Mark Carney has launched a pilot phase of its long planned compensated buyback program for prohibited assault style firearms, which critics widely describe as a confiscation due to the mandatory nature of the prohibitions and penalties for non-compliance. This kicked off on October 2nd, 2025, 5 days ago, in Nova Scotia, among the first active collection efforts for individual owners after years of delays. So something is happening, it's bothering the people, but it's not knock, knock, gun control, open the door and lay down on the floor, or we'll shoot you. It's not that. But it's a harsh thing they're doing, and they're being pretty ugly about it. Um, what's gonna, you know, it's it doesn't mean that they're not going to have any guns anymore. They're just focusing on the assault weapons. So that would be semi-automatic assault weapons. So a lot of other weapons, like if you had a shotgun, they'd probably not be after that. If you had a hunting rifle, they'd probably not be after that. So it's not a good thing. But I think again, it's a case of the alarmists, and specifically it's a fear of Trudeau being overthrown in the form of a revolution. That's why they don't want the people to have guns. Period. That's all it is. It's never anything but that. When you have gun control, crime rises. And the elite don't care. They got bodyguards and security measures and armored cars. They don't care about it. And the so-called middle class and the lower class does, you know. Okay. Oh, let's see what else we got here in the news. The United Kingdom, we could say England, blocked a page on the internet launched by the Israeli authorities in connection with the second anniversary of the October 7th massacre. It was detailing what happened in the massacre, and the British, because they have a high Muslim population and the Muslims don't want anybody to understand that they started October 7th by burning people alive and raping them and stuff like that. They want all that not being spread around. So Britain was more than happy to help them. Um, there's dry conditions putting 8.2 million people in Illinois residential areas. So there's a drought affecting 8.2 million people in Illinois now. That's one of the ways America gets, the daughter of Babylon gets destroyed. It's not a warning, it's an actual method of destruction. The actual page that the UK blocked is called October 7th. No, it's called October7files.com, October7files.com. So it's actually documentation of what the Muslims did to us. Um, EU Defense Commissioner statement. EU Defense Commissioner Andrius Kobilis has said that Western intelligence agencies have evidence that Russia is EU. That Russia is discussing a potential attack on NATO. So what? Russia's probably been discussing a potential attack on NATO for decades. Why are they doing an alert on this right now? They're warmongering. He refers to prior statements by German intelligence claiming they similarly hold evidence of Kremlin deliberations. So he's saying they got evidence that Russia is planning on attacking NATO. Well, great. That's war drums. It goes on and it says he emphasizes that such signals are signals like that have to be taken extremely seriously, even if it's not well, they're going to take it seriously, that's for sure. Now, this is, if you're not going to get scared when I tell you this, there's something wrong with you. You should get very scared. Ghislaine Maxwell was the individual who appears as a female to work with Epstein as his right-hand person, his number one, his go-to. Okay? Now, Ghislaine got convicted of this trafficking with youthful, child sex, and, got put in prison for quite a spell. Trump now comes out with a statement that says he's going to the Justice Department to basically feel them out on giving Ghislaine Maxwell a pardon. Why would Trump want to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell? There are pictures taken with Trump and Ghislaine with Epstein. So Trump may have been friendly with Ghislaine, very friendly even, and might have feelings for Ghislaine, but I don't think it's predominantly that. That could be part of it. What I personally believe is that Ghislaine got word to Trump that she's sick and tired of being in prison and enough is enough and you better pardon me or I'm going to take 50 or 60 of you jackasses down with me. Or I'll make a deal with the prosecutor or something like that. I don't know. Whatever she said got Trump sufficiently scared. So he's taking it to the Justice Department, which is his people running it, the Attorney General of the United States and stuff, and he's telling them what he intends to do and prepping them for it. That's what I think he's doing. how the heck can he pull off pardoning a child sex trafficker convicted with Epstein? How can he do that? How could he even think about doing that? You see my point? It appears to me that Trump was on Epstein Island probably, 10 or 20 or 30 times. That's what I think. When Clinton went to Epstein Island, he shook his bodyguards. He went without his bodyguards. So it was such a bad place, he couldn't bring the bodyguards there. And the bodyguards it might not have been that. It might have been the bodyguards were afraid to go there because they'd be complicit in things that could put them in jail for the rest of their lives. And these aren't the kind of people that would necessarily want that. But, it also was, they didn't want them having that much information on so many different people. And the Secret Service people were probably not very transactional in those days. So, pretty interesting situation. I don't know how that's going to play out. How could he want to pardon this person? You see what I'm saying? People need to wake up and realize what they got with Trump. They don't get it yet. Okay? Trump's going around putting the spin on this Gaza ceasefire. And, you would listen to Trump and you think, oh, wow, this is going to actually work. Where they're making a mockery out of him, and he's sitting there saying, well, I hope we have the hostages released this week. He's only doing that to get the attention of the Nobel Peace Prize people in Norway, that's all. But it's not going to come to pass. When Trump realizes he didn't get the Nobel Prize, he might come out of the chute angry like a bull in a china shop, or something. But I think he's going to consider himself liberated, and now he can go make war. They do give the Nobel Peace Prize out every year, so the jerk may try to do this again the next year. So he would try to do most of his warmongering in the first 6 months of, from October 10th, So you'd have November, December, January, February, March, probably through about Easter. And then he might try to start making himself look like a peacemonger again. So he might be thinking he's got 6, 7 months to go out and wage war. The dollar currency is still in the toilet. He's not getting rid of that. I mean, this guy's getting worse by the day, and people are just, praising him like he's doing a good job. The economy in America is falling apart. Now, speaking of a lack of peace in Syria, remember, he's the one that liberated this idiot Jelani, the new head of Syria, and lifted the sanctions off of this murdering lunatic, an Al-Qaeda murderer, or an ISIS murderer with a new paint job. Now, the Druze, as far as I know, are still under duress, maybe not under active massacre, and the Christians are under duress there. But now we're looking at the Kurds up in the north and northeast of Syria, the government of Syria uses the Syrian National Army, as you call it, the regular army, which is Bashar Assad, but it's not Bashar Assad. It's backed by Turkey, Erdogan in Turkey, financially and with weapons and stuff like that, backs these people, and he hates the Kurds, so he's having them massacre the Kurds, trying to go after the Kurds with active gunfights and stuff like that. So this Giuliani is massacring and genociding Alawites, other kinds of Muslims that he doesn't understand, Kurds, Druze, Christians. And this is Trump's boy. See how bad Trump is? He doesn't get anything to go right. He's stupid. People keep voting for him. Am I saying that you should have voted for Kamala? No, no. I wouldn't vote because you've become a partaker in the evil that the person you voted for did. Does that make sense? So it's not a good thing to go around voting for these sluggards. So we were on pretty serious alert last night, and we still are today. We're on alert because it's the the second anniversary of October 7th, the big massacre where 1,300 people were killed. So we were on pretty high alert. Still are, till tonight. And it also is, I think it's what they call Simchat Torah today, which is their rabbinical calendar is off. It's a holiday they have where they go to the synagogue and they stay up all night and read the Torah. Okay. Do they read the Kabbalah or the actual Bible? I think they read not the Kabbalah, the Talmud. No, I think they actually do read the Bible. That goes on. It should be going on now. So they eat, they drink coffee. So I don't believe they fast. It's not in the Bible. It's not in Leviticus 23. But they practice it. So that's what they're up to. So far, things have been quiet, and it probably will be. The highest risk of an attack would have been less during the night hours, but it's already 8:30 or something like that in the morning. Can't read that. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah, it appears to be about 8:30 or something. So, the day changes at sundown here in Israel. So I don't think they'll do any attack tonight. It could happen, but I don't know. We're on high alert for terrorism strikes and stuff like that. Is today a legal holiday? I believe so. Let me check. I think they're closed. The government's closed today. We'll find out. Yesterday was not. But I think the people got off work early yesterday so they could celebrate Simchat Torah. Their calendar is all screwed up, so I'm not sure what holiday they're actually celebrating now, but they're the 7th and the 13th are the only national holidays. So it's today and then on the 13th. So I guess they're on Tabernacles or something. They call it Sukkot. Well, in Yiddish we called it Sukkah. Let me verify that. They're months off. They're in the 8th month. It's to them the 7th. They're in the 8th month. They don't know where they are in the calendar. They don't care either. So it's Sukkot, I'm pretty sure, is what we're dealing with here. Let me refresh the gold page and see what the price is. Didn't want to refresh, I think. Let's see. No, there it is. Right now, gold is $39.62. Silver is $48.51. It's very, very high. War drum high. Let's see. Yeah, it's just Sukkot, which is Feast of Tabernacles. They let me tell you how they do it. They call it a sukkah. You would in English refer to it as tabernacle, a temporary dwelling. Now, the ultra Orthodox in Israel have apartments in their neighborhoods that are ultra Orthodox, like Bnei Brak or Brick, and outside of Tel Aviv, and Mea Shearim, a section of Jerusalem. And they have apartments that have a balcony, and the balcony is attached to the house, and they call it a Sukkot. It's not, but they call it that. And it, it's a concrete balcony with sliding glass door, and they have some sort of metal, for the roof, not a solid roof, but they have places where they could lay leaves, things like that on there, so you could still see the sky through it. and they'll try to sleep outside on the balcony and take their meals on the balcony. But it's rather convenient if you need a shower or you want to go to the toilet or get something out of the refrigerator. You just go from the balcony into the house and take care of it. It's not a big thing. So it's a perversion of sleeping or living in a tabernacle. Um, that's how they do it. Now in America, nobody had houses like that I knew in the Bronx back then. We didn't have balconies. We had fire escapes that were not anywhere near what you could do. You couldn't do this on a fire escape at all. They had a hole where the steps were to go down or go up. There was no room for it. I used to sit by the window with the fire escape when I was a kid and eat cherries and or fruit and look out the window and sit there. And my parents' generation, they used to sit out on the fire escape, but that sort of stopped in in the 50s. They weren't doing that anymore. That was pre-World War II. They would go up to the roof and sunbathe. That kind of went away. People weren't doing that anymore. And they used to go up and put a blanket down on the tar on the roof. And it would be a junky blanket because if the tar got hot, it would probably stain your blanket. And they would either bring a beach chair and sit on the chair, or they would sit on the blanket and they would sunbathe kind of privately. There would be a few people up on the roof, maybe, or maybe nobody. But as the crime rate grows, that became less attractive. People didn't do it. And they started putting locks on the door from inside the building where the hallways are. You walked all the way up, and there was a small staircase to the roof, and there was a metal door, and it had a latch usually, and somebody could put the latch down and lock you out. But back in the 20s and 30s, I don't think they bothered locking or having latches on these roof doors. They just open and people would go up to the roof. They even made a song about it in the 50s or 60s called Up on the Roof. It was a hit song about a boy and a girl meeting up there. Um, but I used to go with friends and we'd play on the roof, and then the neighbors would hear us banging around and look out the window, and they'd complain to my mother, tell me to stop doing it. They think it's somebody's getting robbed. And they're climbing from the roof to the fire escape in the back where they could uh, break into the house. In the front of the building, the fire escapes didn't go to the roof for some reason, just in the back. So you had much more security in terms of someone breaking in your house from the front. But that kind of died away. And we had a big park in the neighborhood and a parkway, and I don't remember anybody ever going there and laying around in a bathing suit and getting a suntan. And I just don't think I ever saw that once. People would sit out there, and their face and their arms would get burned, but that's all I ever saw. People wanted to lay around in a bathing suit, they would go up on the roof, or they would go, if they had a private house, they go in the backyard or the porch. But they would go normally to the beach, and that's what they would do. You could take a bus to the beach for 15 cents, and the beach was free. And the sand was so hot, you couldn't walk on it. I mean, it really made you scream. So people would, I don't know, run to the water in the hot sand and then come back. And usually you had a towel that you laid on. And There was something we did when we were kids. As an adult, I don't think we would have been that happy going there. It was rather uncomfortable, and going home on the bus after burning in the sun, and the buses had no air conditioning and they were hot. It wasn't a great day. But as a kid, you'd go and say, wow, we spent the day at the beach, and, I'm a big shot, when you're 12 or something. People used to drown with regularity there. The lifeguards were pretty good, I thought. Maybe I was wrong. They would see people, and they generally, what I saw them rescue were very old people. So I think they were probably dehydrated, went in the water, and they got the reflection of the sun off the water, and maybe they passed out or they got dizzy, and they'd fall in the water, and the lifeguard would jump off his chair and run out to them. I think a lot of times he'd save them, and sometimes he wouldn't, I guess. Uh, don't know. They had guys that came around, they had a big tank on their back with drinks, usually an orange drink. It was usually not carbonated, and they kept it cold. It was so cold. You loved it, and it was, I think, 15 cents, and they had a paper cup like a cone. It wasn't a large amount you got, and you would drink one or two of those if you had the money while you were there, and it would kind of hydrate you, and then you could go to the water fountains, which had pretty cold water, and get free water. Um, they also sold. They had food stands. You could get, I guess, hot dogs or pizza or something. I don't remember. I never bought them. They probably were pretty vile. But the juice was very good. I think it was called Needix. It was very good, and it was very cold, and that was a refreshing thing. But it wasn't cheap. And I don't know how those guys did it. They're walking around in 95-degree heat. The tank on their back, when it was full, was probably 40 pounds. I don't know how they did it. I mean, and they had to wear clothes, and I don't know. But I guess they were making enough money to make themselves happy. And so we're waiting and watching and seeing what Trump does. And I think all the wars are on hold until Wednesday or Thursday. And we'll see what our boy Trump comes up with for then. But all the leaking information we're picking up from Muslim media and other sources here in Israel is that we're light years away from anything resembling any kind of a peace deal that Netanyahu would likely ever sign. Trump doesn't care if he thinks he's got a small chance of winning the Nobel Peace Prize. He'll tell Netanyahu to sign anything. So this could result in a serious falling away between Trump and Netanyahu, the kind of falling away that Trump will never forgive Netanyahu, and then start taking it out on Israel as well. So we're not sure what's going to happen yet, but we're watching. We'd be watching, huh? All right. So let me see if we have any questions in the live stream. I don't believe we have any um, uh, prayer requests today. I'll give it a. Let me check the live stream. Well, I don't know where it's still Monday anymore. It's probably pretty much used up. Maybe Hawaii is Monday for another hour or something. I don't know. Maybe, or maybe it's over. All right. No, I don't see anything cooking over here. To go along with this possible story, let's check. Probably dehydrated, went in the water, and they got the. Well, I don't know where it's still Monday. Well, I guess that's what I got for today, guys. So we're still sitting here a little bit on pins and needles till today's over to see what happens with if we're going to get attacked. Now they might attack us during the week, but I don't think so. So we go back to normal mode tomorrow. In other words, the stores will be open and the government will be open. Today, everything is kind of closed. Um, I think it is closed. I don't know what's open today. Um, well, the hospitals, the fire, the police, the military. Um, in the Arab areas, they would be open today. So if you went to, there's a supermarket in an Arab area near, well, right around Tiberias, actually. And there's a big supermarket there, and they have an Arab restaurant there. It's not a very good restaurant we ate there. It's expensive, and they make you think you're getting a great piece of meat, but you're not. And the supermarket is pretty good. So the people that don't observe the holidays will go there. Who are these people? Well, Messianics, uh, the UN people, people from embassies and other governments, and things like that. Foreigners. If they know about it, they'll go shopping there if they need to go shopping or go eat there. And you could also go to Nazareth Elite or Nazareth, which is Arab, Muslim, and there's places there that'll be open. And then you could also go to Arab villages, smaller communities around the area here, and they'll have stores open today. So they open up, but the Jewish places will be closed. Most of them pertaining to food, kosher certificates that they could lose if they open up. If you need a drugstore, you could go to the hospital. You could go to an Arab village and go to the drugstore there, depending what you can do for prescription. The Arab drugstores will give you what in the Israel areas you need a prescription for. They will frequently do it without a prescription. They used to anyway. I've never tested it, but you can buy. I mean, you're not going to go there and say, "Hey, I need 200 oxycodone." They won't do that. But if you wanted, say, an antibiotic or a diarrhea medicine or a stomach thing, or eye medicine or ear medicine or some skin salve for an infection or something, or a milder pain medicine. Uh, And they would give you these things. You know, just some things they wouldn't give you. But typically, psych meds and pain meds, they wouldn't give you. Yeah, but they give you mild pain med. You know, it used to be here that codeine was without a prescription. Maybe it still is. I never checked. I hate that stuff, but you used to be able to buy aspirin or a Tylenol or something with codeine in it over the counter. Now, Netanyahu's a complete rat, so he may have stopped that from going on. It used to be that you could go to the drugstore and say, I have prescription for, some antibiotic or some drug, and I ran out, I need to get more. And the drugstore would say, who was the doctor that gave it to you? And you gave him the doctor's name. And you had to know, like it was tetracycline 500 milligrams. He'd say, how many do you want? And if you said 200, he'd throw you out. But if you said 12 or 16 or something like that, or 24, they'd give it to you. Netanyahu stopped that, I think. He's just a horrible person. The poorest excuse for a human being. So I don't know if those days were, life without Netanyahu as prime minister was much better. 23 years or so with him as prime minister killed Israel. It killed Aliyah. It killed the economy. It killed the housing. It killed the quality of life. It killed everything. He's just a curse, in my opinion. I'd say he's a curse on Israel. And the people voted him into office because they like the corruption, because they're evil. And they voted this piece of garbage in. And he's wrecking them, their lives, their country, their future. And they're still praising him and thinking he's a good guy, you know. And the Attorney General and the Supreme Court want to get rid of him. And the people are mad at the Attorney General and the Supreme Court for wanting to get rid of him. He's terrible. He's terrible. The people, we got infiltrated in the West Bank because that jerk doesn't put up enough security. Oh, he's so bad. So very evil. So anyway, okay, so that's what I got. So I'll close us with a prayer for everybody. And if you're a true believer, you can agree. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, my Heavenly Father Jehovah, I pray for all the true believers and their households and their families and their kids that are walking in the true gospel. I pray that all our problems be lifted from us that come from governments, corporations, Satan bots, neighbors, work co-workers, employers, teachers, anything, that these problems be lifted from us. In many, many cases, they're imposed by Satan and the unclean spirits and people that serve them. I pray that these problems all get lifted from us, including me and my wife, and I pray that all our animals and pets would be safe and secure and happy, healthy, and whole, and so would we. And I pray we have adequate finances and then some, and that all efforts from the unclean spirits and the Satan bots to suppress our making and earning money and keeping it and spending it wisely and not having it taken away from us. All this bad stuff doesn't happen any further. And I pray that you, my Heavenly Father, pour your Holy Spirit out on the believers, and we have your shalom peace, and we have your patience, your calm, your rest, your joy. And I pray that we have better live streaming videos in the future with more and better teaching about the Bible. And I pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, and you can agree with this even if it's a video. Now, we're getting closer and closer, as you guys should know. There's several signs we need to look for. One would be Elijah training the Levites and the next temple. Another would be destruction of daughter of Babylon. When we see these things, we know we're getting a lot closer. Whatever happens in Russia and Ukraine isn't going to make me think that we're getting closer, because it's not going to be any type of event that's going to give us that indication. What happens in Israel will, and what happens to the daughter of Babylon, the United States, will. What Ukraine and Russia and NATO do to each other is not going to give us any good news about anything, nor would China and Taiwan and North Korea, South Korea, none of that, okay? So you're chasing the wrong things when you look for that. So what these people do is they get you jacked up on nuclear war, and then everybody, oh, we're going to glow in the dark. We better see what's going on with Russia. You know. Russia can't fight NATO. It can't win. The only way it could happen is if the whole gang starts up at once. China, North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, Belarus, Cuba, Russia, then they could do it. But without them all going at the same time, they can't. I don't think. They'll just get wiped out. And I think Trump was all along fooling me. I thinking he was weak militarily and didn't want war and stuff. I'm not so sure that's the case anymore. I think he was chasing that Nobel Prize right from the get-go, or shortly after the get-go. And that's why I think he stopped the Iranian thing with the attack, the 12-day war. He got nervous that thing was going too far and would mess up his Nobel Peace Prize. So I think we're turning a corner at the latest this coming Friday, if not Wednesday. Can the Nobel Peace Prize really do anything anymore after Wednesday? They got to make the award on Friday, so I highly doubt they're going to get together Friday morning and try to figure it out. It could be, but it's probably going to be done on Wednesday or Thursday, and they're just going to do the formalities on Friday. So I wish all you well that have the true gospel, B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, and I'm out of this, and we'll keep, watch everything like Yeshua said, watch, and we'll be watching, and we'll be posting. And I'm putting a lot of stuff up on my Telegram. If you want to know how to get on my Telegram, send me an email. My email address is in the description box under the video. It's Israel Giving with the number 7 at gmail.com. Israel Giving, one word with the digit 7 at gmail.com. And it's free. The app is free. Everything's free. And I put stuff up there when we're in war about 5 times a day. Now about 3 times a day. And it gets a lot of posting, and you'll get a pretty good spread of information, mostly about the Middle East, quite a bit about America, quite a bit about Europe, and a little bit about Ukraine and Russia. I don't bother with putting up all the battles with Ukraine and Russia and, he said, she said. It's not a prophetically big deal. It's not in prophecy. It's not something I'm that concerned about one way or the other, All right, so that's it. I send my shalom to all those who love Yeshua HaMashiach, and I'm out. Thanks, guys.